Oh yeah! Welcome to the Live Ukulele Podcast. My name is Brad Bordessa, and you're tuning in for the first episode of 25. Yeah, we made it. For better or for worse, we're here in 2025. And really looking forward to getting the podcast rolling again. It's been a nice break, taking November and December off just to kind of focus on other projects, hang out with the family, and play some gigs, do all that fun stuff. But I am looking forward to bringing you this podcast content. And even though nobody quite knows what to do with podcasts yet, I still feel like it's a real cornerstone of what I'm able to best present with. All of my concepts and the thoughts that are running through my mind. It's a really nice venue for me to share them here on the podcast. And it seems like you folks like listening to it. So I really appreciate you tuning in. And hope that this season is just as good as the last or even better. In this episode, want to do a little bit of catching up on some news and some updates, and also set some goals along with talking about something that I think is important for any musician, but it's especially important for folks who maybe who kind of exist in their own bubble. Maybe they're solo players, maybe you live out in the boonies and you just play ukulele by yourself, for yourself, and you don't have a chance to have peer interactions so much and realize that, sometimes those peers can give you good feedback. It might not always be what we want to hear, but the peers can give good feedback. And a lot of times if you maybe post a video of yourself playing on the internet or something, random strangers don't want to give you critiques, especially with the kind of vibe of the ukulele community. Everybody wants to be positive all the time. So there's this thing that happens where you think that everything is good, not necessarily your playing, but the ideas that you have and the things you're pursuing and maybe the things you choose to spend your time implementing. There might be some bad decisions in there. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode, killing your babies, as they call it in the writer world. Before we get too far into it, this episode is brought to you by liveukulele.com/store. That's one of the web's greatest libraries of premium ukulele lessons. You can go check that out and learn to improve your technique, your strumming, your picking, your music theory knowledge, your Hawaiian songs vocabulary, and there's even stuff in there for beginners, like how to pick for beginners, and my critically acclaimed chord reference book. If you haven't checked any of my lessons or ebooks or videos out before, I invite you to do so. It's a great way to support the podcast and all the work that I put into all of this stuff. All right, so by far the biggest thing that I'm excited about this season in regards to the content that I create and liveukulele.com is the updates changelog. I use WordPress to make the website, and because of the way WordPress is structured, there are posts, which are a chronological sequence of different postings that you will put on a website, and then there's pages, and the pages are nested. So you can have liveukulele.com/lessons/beginner/how to strum basics or something like that. I'm just making that up. But I have moved to pages in the past number of years for all of my content. There are no more posts on the website. I've moved to pages just because it's easier to organize and it makes more sense from a structural standpoint. But what this means is it kind of has taken away my ability to post about new stuff that's going on. Back in the older days of Live Ukulele, I would make a blog post and say, hey, I created this new tab. Here's a link to the tab, and you could still download it from the general tabs page. But there would be this blog post announcing that there was something new on the tabs page. And so without posts, it's been really just sporadic things on social media or in the newsletter being the only way for folks to know what was going on. But this month, I put together an updates changelog, which is missing a whole lot of content because I've been doing the website since 2007. Certainly cannot go back that far in time and find everything that I did. But I backfilled it from late September of 2024. And it's just a chance for me to keep track of what I've been doing. It's a chance for you folks to see what's new. And it's pretty cool. I was kind of pleased with myself. I figured out how to make it self-populate on the front page and on the lessons page. If you go to either of those pages, you'll see the most recent 5 updates. And those 5 updates pull from the main change log that has all of the listings in it. A little bit of PHP magic, a little bit of polish from ChatGPT, because as far as I can tell, that's what it's best at, is just helping with code. But this updates changelog, it's pretty cool. It's a great way for me to, like, when I'm going to send out a newsletter, I can just look back on something and have a reference for like, oh yeah, this, and this happened since the last newsletter. I'm going to share about these things. And if you are one of the dedicated super fans who checks into liveukulele.com often, hopefully you'll be able to see what's going on a little bit easier and to figure out where the adjustments have been made. So, things that have come up on the change log, I'm just going to run through them really quick. I'll send out a newsletter after this podcast goes out probably. But back in November, I switched. I used to have baritoneukulele.net because there's not a whole lot of baritone presence on the web. And I thought, well, if I had this dedicated website, maybe I could collect some baritone interest and share with people about some stuff. That never really happened. I never really gave it the time it deserved because the main site was always taking up my attention and creating podcasts and videos and ebooks and video courses and all that stuff. Takes up a lot of the time, and there wasn't anything left for the baritone spin-off site. And I was paying for that hosting every year, and the bill was going to come due. And I thought, this is not really doing much sitting here. I don't want to have this bill come through on my credit card, so I'm just going to move the content back onto liveukulele.com. So now there is a lessons/baritone section of the website, and it's pretty simple. There is just kind of an overview of what baritone is and how it works, and then there is a little bit on chords, how to transpose from chords from one instrument or one place to the other. There's a bit on strings because finding baritone strings I found to be kind of challenging, finding something that worked and had the right tension and had a nice sound without being super squeaky and et cetera, et cetera. And then I added, kind of as I was doing this, I realized that the main question I answer all of the time is, do you have a baritone resource for this? Or does this video course work for baritone? Or does this work for baritone? That work for baritone? And so I put together a page that can kind of be my answer. Instead of having to write it out every time in an email, I can just point people to this reference page, which is kind of about the philosophy of learning baritone ukulele. And I'll definitely put a link to this in the newsletter, but also check out the podcast description. I'll try and remember to put a link in there as well. Or just check the changelog, because that's really cool. But the baritone learning philosophy is just basically the hard truths of baritone business from like a music educator standpoint, why we might or might not want to create dedicated baritone content, but then also the number, not the only, but a number of ways that you can transpose different content for baritone. And so hopefully that information is useful for folks who are like, oh, there's no baritone tabs, there's no baritone this, there's no baritone that. And you can just take everything from GCEA ukulele and put it on your baritone. So that page is exciting. That's new. There's an arrangement of Silent Night. I updated the vibrato lesson. And then I'm trying to get on YouTube a little bit more regularly this year. That's one of my resolutions. Try and grow that because, YouTube is owned by Alphabet. It's owned by Google. So I can only assume that with Google's amazing overreach and huge market share in the search industry, that they're going to prioritize content on YouTube. And if you're looking for things on Google, it's probably a good bet that they're going to try and get you to another Google adjacent website, and that is YouTube. And there's just a ton of people on there. So I figure go where the people are. It's kind of the most enjoyable of all social media websites, it seems like, for me. Not that it's really social media, but working on YouTube stuff doesn't burn me out like, oh, I need to make a Facebook post, groan, or I need to do something on Instagram, groan. I don't feel that way so much about YouTube. So we'll see how that goes. And if you're not subscribed, please head over to my YouTube channel. Any of the links in the changelog will take you there, and click on the subscribe button so you can see what's going on and keep an eye on those things. I've been working here in the studio kind of on tuning up the look and the set, as it were. It's my room, so it's just like, it is what it is. It's not really a set. But tuning that up so I can just turn on the camera, turn on the mic preamp, and press record. And it's all ready to go, and it eliminates a couple of steps so I don't have to import, video files off of the camera onto some random place in my file explorer and then find those and organize them and put them somewhere that I'll remember, and then drag them into DaVinci and then sync the audio and all of that stuff. It's not hard, but it's humbug when you're trying to bang out a bunch of content. And so now I just press the button, drag the file into DaVinci, and I'm pretty much set to go. So that's really cool and should make things easier. In other news, I've been cranking away on a new ebook. I'm calling it Plug In because it is about everything that you need to know to sound really good when you plug your ukulele into an amp or into a PA and you're going to make it loud. Whether you're playing in your bedroom and you just want to be a little bit louder, or you want to experiment with effects, or you're going out and you're gigging. You're playing at the farmer's market or at an open mic or whatever. It's almost 100 pages. It's just all these ebooks. They just get bigger and bigger and bigger as I work on them. But it's basically full of my firsthand experience running live sound, playing with my own pedals, having tons of different pickups and ukuleles over the years, and talking about what works and what doesn't, and what is like the really key information that you need to know to get a good sound. Because there's lots of bad information, and if you don't have a background in this stuff, maybe you're not a tech person or whatever, it's really easy to get steamrolled by the technology and like panic and like, oh, I guess that's just good enough, and it sounds bad, and that's what you end up with, and you get stuck with that. So I hopefully with this ebook can share some insight into what really works right from the get-go, because God knows I've spent probably tens of thousands of dollars at this point on gear that didn't really do what it needed to. And I learned a lot from all those purchases and the different things that, I have tried and experimented with. But I feel like at this point in my path, I have a really solid setup that works super well. It always sounds good, great, pretty good. And I feel pretty confident sharing that with folks. So hopefully that can be useful. I'm not exactly sure when it's coming out. As I'm recording this podcast, I feel like I'm really on the home stretch, but I still got to get all of the materials together, all the other pieces. The actual PDF is almost done, but there's a bunch of other related stuff that I want to include. I want to put together a set of videos walking you through me processing my ukulele sound so that it's not just like, do this and buy this and set it like this. And you can actually see me working through the process of, listening and hearing that works, that doesn't work. And so that'll be bundled with the ebook. That'll be a piece of it. And then I also want to have a couple of separate guides because the ebook is 100 pages long. I also want there to be like a quick start guide. So if you've never plugged in before, you can like start at the quick start guide and see, okay, I plug this in here and plug that in there and then turn it on and know what to do from a simple standpoint, and then learn more and more as you read through the rest of the book. So that should be out this spring, if not the end of winter. We'll see how things go. Keep an eye peeled. There will definitely be a newsletter announcement. If you're not on my newsletter, go to liveukulele.com/sign up and have a look. See what is going on. With all of this time off, I've been kind of thinking about what my role is in the scene, where I stand and how I'm going to fit in the future. And I think that kind of my resolution for this year is that I've accepted that the web is very much changing with AI and mostly just AI changing everything. The web climate and social media too, of course, but that's been happening for a while, has really changed how people interact with content, and that it's all kind of in a huge upheaval right now. And maybe some of you folks have noticed, but like if you want to find good information on the internet outside of Reddit, that it's impossible to find anything on Google. Like the results are the worst they've probably ever been in my memory, unless the information that you need happens to be in a Reddit post, because Google puts Reddit right at the top for everything, because it's firsthand experience. It's the best information that you can get. Usually that firsthand experience is what you want, but I would hope to get it from like an actual website. Like liveukulele.com is a documentation of all of my experience. But Google doesn't rank, websites like mine so much anymore. You got to be Forbes or the Wall Street Journal to rank. So they just serve you Reddit, because that's like that still that firsthand experience, and Google is able to catalog all of that information. And for some reason, they're prioritizing it. I'm sure there's some money in it somewhere. But regardless, I'm not getting a whole lot of traffic to the website. So I'm kind of trying to reinvent and figure out how to make things work, how to adapt and change. And so I think it's kind of lame, but my resolution this year is to really just keep on holding the line, because I think all of this is going to come back around again, because the bottom line is that the internet needs content. AI is never going to have the experience of an ukulele player who has been out performing in front of people for almost 20 years and jamming with Hawaiian musicians and hearing their stories. None of that is ever going to be on AI, and that experience cannot be captured unless somebody like myself shares it in a way that it can access, which is another piece of the concern, but that is a much bigger topic. But in general, I feel like the content that I can create is still valuable, and it's still going to remain valuable. We're just kind of in a holding pattern waiting for the rest of the internet and even for Google to realize that that is the case, and to start sending traffic back to blogs, back to independent websites that have that firsthand experience and aren't necessarily just Reddit. So you heard it here. That's my resolution. Just keep on keeping on, keep making great content, do a little bit more YouTube stuff, and keep trying to optimize so that the people who are interested in engaging with me, they have, a clear path of ways they can learn, ways they can engage, and we can build the communication, the connection in that way, and just kind of stay on that old school path of experience and content first, and everything else can kind of fall into place second wherever it needs to. Okay, but let's get into the main topic I want to discuss today, and that is killing your babies. I think I heard this first from Stephen King's autobiography, which is wonderful. It's called On Writing, and it's half autobiography and half like how to write as a writer, like writing tips. It's an amazing book. I love to read it. I've read it a couple of times and probably should reread it again soon, because it's absolutely hilarious and also super insightful for myself as somebody who writes quite a bit. But also just like from a business standpoint and how arts work and things like that. But he talks in his book, in like the writing advice part of the book, kill your babies. Some of your ideas are not going to be good. And just because you created them and you put them on the page doesn't mean that they can necessarily stay there if you want the product to be at a certain level of quality. The same goes for music, because you can create something, you can write something, you could record something, or even just play it once and think, hey, that's pretty cool. I like that. And if you get too attached to it, if there's something better or a better way to get from point A to point B, you might not ever notice because you're so attached to that baby of yours that you created. And so you kind of have to be your own editor as you play music. And this is a super fine line, because on one hand, you don't want to be overly judgmental about what you play. We're just trying to enjoy music and to play the best music that we can. And so that's really great. But out of that music that you can do, that you can play, there is bound to be some things that you think are cool that are not cool. And so if you kind of come at it from an editor perspective, sometimes you can catch those things. For instance, there's a video tutorial on YouTube that I made of Everlong by the Foo Fighters, classic, popular garage rock song. And I learned to play it. I had it in my solo set for a while, and it was fine as a solo song. And I would play it, and I would really change the presentation so it kind of fit just on a solo ukulele. I wouldn't try and get like super rock with it, because that's just tacky in my opinion. But then I took it to the band. This was years and years ago, before COVID. I took it to the band. I was like, let's try playing Everlong. Like, I know it. Everybody loves that song. And we tried playing it with the band, and it just sounded gross. It didn't work. And it was one of those cases where I, as the musician, as the editor, had to say, this is just not the move. I got to kill this baby, because maybe it's fine for my solo set, but in this situation for this band, it doesn't work. It sounds just like any other band. It sounds like crappy garage rock. And that's not what we try and do. That's not our voice as musicians when we come together and work in that specific configuration. So we don't play Everlong in the band. That just doesn't work for us. And I had to be mindful of that, and you kind of swallow your pride and realize, okay, that's just the way it is. It's not necessarily that it's a bad song. It's not necessarily that I'm singing it poorly. It's not necessarily that I'm playing it poorly. But in this situation, it just doesn't work. And this could be a lot of things. This could be song choices. This could be arrangement choices. This could even be technical production choices. Like I saw the other day, there was somebody who posted a video, a kid who's a talented player, who I hadn't really seen before, but talented player playing a cover of some song. Can't remember what it was. Really great cover, but the thing was so drenched in reverb that it was almost painful to listen to. It was like all super washed out with this cheap reverb sound, and it kind of turned me off of the whole thing. And I think that for that person, for that player, in their search for creating a better product and a better presentation, the baby that they should have killed was that reverb. Turn the reverb down, man. Let the playing shine through. But I'm sure in that moment they were like, oh, this reverb makes it sound so good. And that's all they hear in their head. And we've all done it. I've done it so many times. You just get stuck on that one thing, and it kind of obscures your appreciation for the whole entire picture. Another one is things like drum loops or other things like that. Sometimes, drum loops can be cool and fun to play with, but when you go out and perform, just because it works for you and it's inspiring for you, depending on how you want to connect with people, if you want people to listen to your music and say like, wow, that's really good. I can really feel their musicianship and appreciate, I appreciate what that musician does. They're not trying to do too much or whatever, da-da-da-da-da. And as soon as you bring in like a drum machine or a looper or something, that impression might change. Not because you're using it badly or that it sounds bad or anything, but maybe there's another musician in the room who's like, well, I would just play it solo. Just do it on one ukulele. So what? That's fine. You just hold your ground and that will be good enough. And sometimes that impression could be, yeah, that sounds better to that person. But it really depends. I think the main thing to take away is that we always have to be our own producers, and we should always be listening critically to the big picture whenever possible. Take a step back and try and listen to the whole thing. All of the pieces, the separate little pieces that you're working so hard to put together. If you're only looking at one specific thing, you're missing so much of the rest of the picture. Like not seeing the forest for the trees or whatever the saying is. It's that same kind of thing where you get stuck in what you're doing and it might not be the best solution. I've gotten involved in a sort of new project lately, not with new people, but kind of a reimagining of an existing duo. My buddy Dagan, who's been on the podcast before, who I've been playing bass with for the past couple of years, just sitting in the back, and he's like, "Oh, you want to come jam?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. I want to kind of learn to play bass a little bit. Do you mind if I just experiment in the back of your songs?" And so I've kind of learned to play bass as his accompanying musician. That's been my sandbox for figuring that stuff out. And it's been great. And he's said like, "Oh man, I super appreciate having that low end. It really ties everything together." But if I can throw him under the bus for a second, he has decided, for a specific reason that I won't disclose, but he's decided that he wants his music to be a little bit more engaging. And for me, like, I've listened to his music for years and I've always appreciated like his thing that he does and his vision of Paniolo music and strumming the guitar and singing. But I've always kind of had in the back of my mind, like, boy, the next thing that could really make this better would be some arranging. And he has come around to that. And I think the comfort that he had in what we were doing before, where it was just guitar and bass and vocals, that's not really going to change. But what is going to change is the approach. He wants to sit down and arrange the songs and kind of produce them so that when he does play, and we do play together, that the music is that much more active and that much more engaging and exciting and takes that next step into being music. And I think that's a good example of somebody who kind of realized that, okay, what I have is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But the next step means that I have to kind of abandon what I've gotten used to. Maybe I'm not seeing the whole big picture and I'm just really focused on like, I don't know, for Dagan, it's like the song choices and the singing and the storytelling. Like those are the aspects that he really focuses on and thinks are great. But because of this conversation that he had, I think he's come to realize that that's not what everybody necessarily needs or wants out of his music. And not necessarily that you should change to fit everybody else's desires. That's not what I'm saying at all. But that sometimes the next step in music is realizing that you can meet in the middle or adapt, or that maybe what you think you want to do is not what you're actually doing, or that the process of getting there needs to change in order to connect in that way. And so I think it's going to be a fun project. We sat down a couple weeks ago for a little quick practice, and we worked through like 5 songs talking about the arrangements that we're going to set up to do these songs. And not necessarily that it has to be exact, perfect every single time, but just thinking of how to add dynamics to the music. And it's kind of interesting because Dagan's a really good musician, and he has a strong sense of what he's doing, but also as a really good musician, he's focused on other aspects. And so to come back and realize that, wow, it's the arranging, I think, that needs to step up. How can I bring more energy and excitement to my music? That's the way. I think that's the thing that he wasn't necessarily seeing before. So he kind of did that self-audit on his music and now has a path forward. He decided, going to kill the babies of just the guy sitting up on stage and talking about the songs and singing the songs, changing course, getting rid of what doesn't work, optimizing, streamlining. And this is like, that's who I am, is streamlining. My mom and dad kind of make fun of me because the projects that I'm doing, I've always got like a project, like around the house project kind of thing. And it's always stuff that it's not like a new thing. It's not like I'm adding a new room. I'm taking what's here and making it more efficient, changing it so that it works better for what I know now. Maybe I built an awesome shelf in one spot, but it's no longer serving the function. I got to kill that baby. I got to take that shelf down, and so that the space can change and adapt and become something different. And that's part of the process I've been working on here in the studio of, streamlining the recording process for making videos. And like I had a curtain across the back of my room that I would always pull across so that when I was doing Zoom lessons or making videos that you wouldn't see the whole room. And I realized, well, what if that curtain wasn't there? Can I make the rest of the room look good so that it can just be the set? And the answer was yes. And it feels good. The room feels more open because there's not extra bars and curtains hanging around the room. And it's just those little iterations and realizing that, well, this thing worked for a while. Now it's not working anymore. So you move on, you adapt and you change and you kill those babies so that you can puka through to the next level. I won't go on and on about this. I think I've made my point. I hope I've made my point. Main thing is just keep an eye out on the big picture. If you're really focused on very specific things, zoom back, record yourself, listen to what you're doing, and maybe pay attention to how the whole thing works cohesively. Think about what a producer would hear instead of being the ultra hyper-focused musician. Like, oh, that chord buzzes. I need to make sure my fingerings are better. Well, are you losing something on the way when you're focusing only on that? Have a broad look, and hopefully you can find some things to improve, to change and adapt, bring to that next level. Moving forward with the podcast, got on the calendar for the first little bit of January an interview with Victoria, Jiggy with Viggy. Looking forward to kind of branching out this season to interview some more kind of maybe diverse folks and spread my net wider. I have my set of, connections in the ukulele scene, and I've talked to a huge portion of them. I think it's time to step out and try and meet new people, make new connections, and bring that to you folks, because I'm in my own little world out here in Hawaii, and I like to really try and feature the music from here and the history of the ukulele being from Hawaii, but also to make sure that we're not just getting stuck in one place, right? That's a good thing. That's a great thing, but there's also opportunities to go beyond and to catch more interesting people. And Viggy's the first on the list. I reached out and she's like, bang, bang, bang. Let's do the thing. So we're going to sit down, see what kind of conversation we can have, and hopefully be bringing that to you in the next episode. But we'll see. Everything is subject to change with the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'll catch you next time. The Live Ukulele Podcast is published on the first and third Saturdays of every month. Mark your calendar, subscribe to the podcast, and bright and early when you wake up on those first and third Saturdays, there should be a new Live Ukulele Podcast waiting for you, ready to press play for your walk across town or your run, or maybe you're doing dishes or whatever. Looking forward to sharing more with you folks this season. Thanks for being here. My name is Brad Bordessa, signing off. Catch you next time. Hui ho.